Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to another episode of Legal Ease, the show that converts legal jargon into legal ease. Tonight, my very special guest is Muhammed Desai, who is the head and founding member of BDS South Africa. Now, Muhammad, after attending a pretty ordinary high school in what he describes as a small unknown farm town of Port Shepstone in Natal, traveled to Jerusalem in Palestine to work for Sabil. Muhammad, assalamu alaikum and welcome to Legal Ease.
Walaikum salam. Jazakallah so much for having this show.
Pleasure to have you on. Muhammad, your travels took you to Palestine, and that's when you encountered the context of the Israeli occupation and apartheid. And during the time that you spent in Palestine, you became better acquainted with the region, its issues, and you furthered your keenness for activism. Now, tell us what happened when you returned to South Africa.
Well, interestingly enough, the year that I was in Palestine, it was in 2004. And in 2004, we saw what is probably today considered one of the single most significant events in the last decade to shape Palestinian solidarity, and also to start shaping an international law discourse in this issue. What I'm referring to is the precedent-setting ruling or advisory opinion that was issued by the world's highest court, the International Court of Justice. In 2004, the ICJ, whilst I was in Palestine, whilst I was volunteering there for these 3 months, the ICJ gave an advisory opinion ruling that the wall that Israel is building, as well as the associated regime, are in violation and contrary to international law. The ICJ went even further. The ICJ went further in terms of calling on all member states, all countries that are party to the ICJ, not to lend any sort of support to the construction of the wall or to the associated regime. So really, the Palestinians at that stage had thought that the international community was going to be playing a decisive role, given that this highest court has now pronounced on this issue.
I understand that in terms of your current position, not only are you a full-time member and coordinator of BDS South Africa, which is an offshoot of the international BDS.
Well, what happened then is a year later, after the ICJ ruling,
right,
the Palestinians got together in Ramallah, in Palestine, realizing that the international community wasn't acting. The Palestinians got together and issued a call to the international community, calling for a program of boycott, divestment and sanctions as a non-violent way to apply pressure on Israel and to bring Israel in line with the international law. Countries of the world, governments of the world weren't taking action, so Palestinians took action by themselves. And importantly is that when Palestinians issued this call for boycott, divestment and sanctions, what we today refer to as BDS, the Palestinians made 3 demands. All 3 demands entrenched in international law and supported by various and several UN resolutions.
Now, I mean, the effect, very importantly, for the BDS, I think, goes back to 2011, when you got the University of Johannesburg to terminate its institutional relationship with Israel's Ben Gurion University. And I think that became subsequently the world's first university to impose an academic boycott. Is that right?
Well, you know, as a young person, I probably wouldn't be involved in Palestinian solidarity work if it wasn't for BDS.
Right.
BDS is goal-orientated. There are victories that you look forward to. It's a very strategic campaign. It's a very exciting campaign.
Right.
And that victory that we had, where we had the University of Johannesburg terminate its relationship with Israel, was precedent-setting, both in terms of the academic boycott of Israel, but also it motivated hundreds, if not thousands, of activists around the world who are involved in Palestinian solidarity and in BDS work.
Now, in 2012, the editorial article published in the Israeli Haaretz newspaper reported that the pro-Israeli lobby in South Africa had been severely outplayed and overpowered by BDS South Africa and the work that you were part of. Do you want to tell us about that?
Well, it's a small organization in South Africa. It's a staff complement of about 10 or 12 people that work on this campaign on a daily basis. We do, however, have hundreds of supporters that come through to the organization and lend their efforts. And I think that BDS South Africa has been fortunate in the sense that we've had the community backing, we've had the backing of the public, and so we've been able to effect change. We've been able to lobby successfully political parties to have clearer resolutions on Palestine. We see, for example, just this week, just on Friday, the alliance led by the ANC declaring that it's going to be intensifying its boycott of Israel, as well as calling on dock workers, transport workers, and retail workers not to touch any Israeli goods. So there's a groundswell of support in South Africa for the Palestinian people, but don't make any quick assumptions. The Israeli lobby is most definitely working as hard as us in terms of trying to undermine the BDS campaign, because Israelis and the Israeli lobby in this country know that when South Africa speaks on the issue of Palestine, the rest of the world watches, the rest of the world listens, and the rest of the world takes action. So South Africa is fundamentally important for the BDS campaign.
Well, look, I mean, historically, there's a very important pedigree there, because we had no less than our late President Mandela, who had a lot to say about the equivalent of the struggle against apartheid and the struggle for the struggle by the Palestinians. But more importantly, recently, I know, with the Gaza crisis, there was an effort to bring out and educate people. The Professor Ilan Pape, I think that has to be credited to BDS, and the recent call for the retail boycott of Woolworth stores, I think that has also been very much in the news. How's that campaign going?
Well, BDS takes the approach that we have to work on different levels. One is the legal angle, where we have certain court cases that we're currently part of. The second is to build a groundswell of public opinion and public support, and that is why BDS South Africa, together with Muslim Views, brought out Ilan Pape on a speaking tour. But then, of course, we involved in activism, in insisting that our community, if you want to be part of the BDS campaign, we have to move beyond just refraining from certain products or refraining from Israeli products. We have to actively get involved in the BDS campaign, because an active involvement and participation has proven successful in other countries in terms of the BDS movement. For example, you see in Europe, Israel's largest exporter of fresh produce, called a Grexco, to the European market, going into bankruptcy because of active BDS campaigning in the supermarkets of Rome, London, and elsewhere in Europe. Likewise, we now are calling for a boycott of one retailer called Woolworths. Some people ask us, why Woolworths over other retailers? All South African retailers do have some form of relationship with Israel. That's true. However, we want to start off with Woolworths, win that campaign, and then move on to the next target. If we have to take on all the retailers all at once, we're going to have very little impact. The Woolworths campaign has garnered a lot of support, both at a community level, but also in recent weeks you see several government ministers, Minister Bladen Zimande, Obed Bapela, Buti Manamela, Ayanda Rodlo, all coming out and supporting the Boycott Woolworths campaign. And crucially in this case, we also have the Public Investment Corporation, the PIC, which is a government entity, as one of the main shareholders. So we are looking forward as BDS South Africa to having engagements with all shareholders of Woolworths to make the case that Woolworths hanging on to that 12 million rand trade relationship with Israel makes bad business sense. It's a reckless investment, and that it's about time that Woolworths takes the correct position, both financially but also politically and morally, to terminate that relationship with Woolworths. So we really are looking forward to a victory in the Woolworths campaign.
Now, you mentioned the law and the cases that you're involved in, but you've been involved in various cases or hearings since 2012. I think your first one was a radio advert that was taken down. You want to tell us about that? Or it was an attempted takedown, yes.
As many viewers will know, the South African Jewish Board of Deputies, the South African Zionist Federation, who make up the Israeli lobby in this country are ruthless in terms of putting pressure on community media, on TV stations, radio stations, print media, in terms of bullying and intimidating all of these media platforms into not covering the Palestinian issue, into not covering the boycott and the BDS campaign. And they tried to do this here to us in 2012 when we had taken out radio adverts on the 5 FM radio station. They went through to the Advertising Standards Authority to lodge complaints that it was anti-Semitic and that it offended certain parts of the population. We were fortunate enough that Weber Wenzel had represented us on this issue pro bono, and we put on through our lawyers we put on a good case. We won that issue, and the ASA had ruled that we were allowed to broadcast our messages, and this was important because we wanted to cut this in the bud. We wanted to stop the Israeli lobby from interfering with our engagements with media, and it has proven to be successful. We now covered across the board, TV, radio, print media covers the BDS campaign because we're making such inroads in terms of the campaign, but also it's a relevant issue for many South Africans across the country.
Now, relevant for tonight's discussion is your recent victory as at 11th September 2014, which was last week Thursday, a judgment in the South Gauteng High Court in the matter in which BDS was the first applicant and Sweetworks Advertising Agency was the second applicant. I think that applicant was represented by Nazir Osman, who we'll talk about later on. And you brought an application that goes back to, I think, 2012, and you had 3 respondents. One was Continental Outdoor Media Pty Limited, the second was the City of Johannesburg, and the third was the Advertising Standards Authority. Now, what's the background to that case?
Okay. Well, BDS South Africa, together with the PSA, had taken out several billboards, major and mega billboards across the country. Most of them were with the maps of Palestine, and underneath the maps of Palestine, it had a subtitle talking about the increasing number of refugees that are created by the Israeli occupation of Palestine. These were highly successful billboards. Many members of the community and public called into BDS South Africa wanting to get involved, wanting more information, and especially from constituencies that we had never worked with. Now, 2 of these billboards were contracted out to Continental Outdoor Media, one of the largest billboard companies on the African continent. Continental Outdoor Media had come under intense pressure from the South African Jewish Board of Deputies and the South African Zionist Federation, and I very confidently mention these 2 organizations because they actually in conversation with Continental Media removed our billboards and issued a press statement claiming victory in 2012 for having removed these billboards. As BDS South Africa, we decided that we weren't going to allow the South African Jewish Board of Deputies or the Zionist Federation to bully us, and we decided to take this matter up in court. And so we were represented by one of the best legal NGOs currently around in the country, the Legal Resource Center, and we gave Continental Media a run for their money. They thought that they're going to squash this activist organization, but we took on this corporation, and as you had indicated, it was a successful case the judgment or court order was handed down on Thursday last week.
Now, in your affidavit, the judge indicates that you speak of an international basis for the advert that you put up. Could you tell us about that? Where did the basis of this, what was the factual background to this?
The one thing that the Zionists and the pro-Israeli supporters don't have is that they don't have international law behind them. We in the Palestinian Solidarity Movement do have international law. And so what we submitted in our court papers was a copy of this International Court of Justice advisory opinion that made it clear that the actions of Israel were illegal, that the actions of Israel were in contravention of international law. We also made attachments of the recent Human Sciences Research Council report. The HSRC is a South African government entity that in 2009 conducted an investigation as to whether Israel is guilty of the crime of apartheid, the crime of occupation, and the crime of colonialism. And this 2009 HSRC report found Israel guilty of all three crimes. And so we made these submissions as part of our application.
Muhammad, it's time for us to take our first break. We remind the viewers to join us after the break and remind you that the lines will be open as usual. The number to call is 011 086 77 0012 or 3. Please stay tuned. We'll be back after this break. And welcome back to Legal Ease, the show that converts legal jargon into legal ease. Just before the break, I was speaking to Muhammed Desai, who is the co-founder of BDS South Africa, and we were speaking of a recent court case and judgment handed down on the 11th of September 2014 in the South Gauteng High Court. This was an application by BDS South Africa and a second applicant against Continental Media. The subject matter was the placing of adverts by BDS on certain billboards at the entrance of Houghton and other prominent areas. And because the billboards depicted the shrinking map of Palestine from 1948 right through to, at that time, 2012, the Continental Media, the contract that they had with them was not honored, and so the matter went to court. And Muhammad was saying to us that they were very ably represented by the Legal Resources Center. Now, unpacking the application itself, we've heard that there was a factual matrix based on the International Court of Justice ruling. I think there's 13 judges, including the president and vice president, that gave a judgment regarding both the wall and the settlement occupation of Palestine, which basically gave you the factual background to take that map and depict it. It is a very simple map, but I think if one remembers, quite dramatic. So the matter went to court. Now, what did the opposition have to say? What did the respondent have to say?
Well, they were caught red-handed. Firstly, they tried to claim that our billboard was in contravention of the Advertising Standards Authority. They also tried to claim that it contravened the City of Johannesburg bylaws, and they tried to make a contractual argument that we didn't have a legitimate and legal contract. We started off firstly by saying that we have the constitutional right of freedom of expression, and on this point we did win. The judge had made it very clear in her judgment on Thursday that the taking down of the billboard was both illegal and unconstitutional.
I think one of the arguments advanced by the first respondent was that the Constitution doesn't apply horizontally. That means between you and I. It's only vertically between the state and subject. Therefore, the freedom of speech limitation was there as between the two subjects of the state. And I think the judge was very clear that based on the Jummah Masjid decision in Durban, that was not so, that there was vertical application of that principle of freedom of expression.
It was very bizarre, in fact, that Continental Media will try to make that argument. We all know that the Constitution in South Africa is the supreme law, but also it's bizarre because Continental Media was represented probably by one of the finest constitutional law experts in this country, Professor Ian Curry. However, I think that one of the reasons why they lost is simply because they were clearly in the wrong here. They were clearly in collusion with the Israeli lobby, undermining our freedom of expression. But they were caught red-handed. The Advertising Standards Authority hadn't declared that our billboards were illegal. The City of Johannesburg, in fact, again embarrassingly for Continental media stood up in court and said that they never asked for the billboards to be taken down. So we systematically went through each one of their arguments, exposed their arguments, and at the end we were very pleased to receive a positive judgment, to receive news that the court has ordered Continental media to put those billboards of ours back up within 10 days, but also making a precedent-setting freedom of expression order, and that is that certain bylaws have to now change given this court process that we went through. And I think that this is important to, one, legally speaking, in terms of securing our freedom of expression and expanding our freedom of expression in this country. But what this court judgment also does is that it sends a very clear message to the Israeli lobby in this country that its days of bullying, its days of intimidation are coming up. Its days of interfering with the Palestinian solidarity movement's right to freedom of expression is up.
I think Continental media had indicated in its papers, had also indicated that they came under tremendous pressure from the Jewish lobby. They said that they had protests from as far as the UK, and that market could be in the region of about 300 million rand that they would tend to lose. Did that carry any weight with the judge?
Not at all. You can't base your judgment on someone being offended. People may be offended, for example, if you speak about human rights. So be it. They can be offended by that under our constitutional right to freedom of expression. So this argument that some people were offended didn't hold any sort of weight in the judgment.
I think another part of the defense of Sayers, who signed on behalf of Continental, was that the person, Hastings Brown, who was the executive in charge and who had signed the contract, didn't have the authority to do so. She didn't understand the Palestinian conflict. She hadn't acquainted herself with the artwork. She hadn't looked deeply into the actual facts of what this advert constituted. How did that argument go down?
They tried to make a contractual argument as well. Well, they failed at making this contractual argument. But in the process, what they did is that they threw one of their own staff members under the bus, trying to claim that it was all her fault, that she didn't, for example, in the court papers and in arguments, they said that she viewed the email, but she didn't read the email, trying to use sort of technical language. But again, the court made it very clear that there was a contract between the advertising agency that we had used and Continental Outdoor Media. And I think that one of the advantages of an organization like BDS South Africa, and something that we in the solidarity movement more generally should adopt, is we shouldn't be scared and bullied by these big corporations, and that we should fight for our rights, whether it's in court or whether it's in the boardrooms and elsewhere.
Mohammed, I understand we have a first call on the line. Please go ahead.
My name is Faisal Khan. I'm from Richards Bay. I'd just like to comment on this. I think they've done an excellent job on mobilizing people across the board. And this political strategy and the legal strategy is spot on. I just want to add something. I think that what you can do is to look at the Woolworth strategy. Their aim is to get people to open accounts. So what we're going to do is to get our people to cut up their Woolworth cards. Politics is about action. It's about social action. So we've got to get our people to cut up their Woolworth cards and get rid of this trust. They trust the customers into buying into Woolworth. And the lower the income, the more the distrust.
So, Mohammed, there you go. Thank you, caller. That suggestion is that there has to be civic order, and there's the politics of debts. And what he's calling for is people to get out of debt, and one of those ways is to cancel their Woolworths accounts. What do you say to that?
Absolutely. I mean, in both, for example, in this billboard issue, we didn't just go to court. We didn't just have lawyers argue for us. We had continuous protests outside the courtroom. We had a continuous engagement with the media. We made sure that social media was abuzz with this issue. And all of this then contributes towards towards a successful campaign. So likewise on the Woolworths boycott, we're not just asking people and members of the community to withdraw their consumer support. We're asking you to go further. Be part of the National Day of Action, which is on the last Saturday of each month, against Woolworths, organize protests, pickets, etc. But also, as a caller has indicated, use other forms of action. Close up your Woolworths account, cut up your loyalty card, make sure that you lodge a complaint with the managers of the stores. Woolworths thinks that this BDS boycott of Woolworths is just going to disappear, just as how Continental media thought that we were going to be shut away by certain lawyers' letters. But that's not the case. We are here. We are a sustainable and a long-term organization that has a long-term view on this issue, and we're going to fight this campaign. And so we need actions like that proposed by the caller to be taken up by people across the country and in all areas and in all races, religions, faiths, and others. Because in many ways, in some ways, we are mimicking or we're replaying what people in the anti-apartheid movement did during the 1980s. They boycotted, they sanctioned, they isolated apartheid South Africa successfully, and we should really derive inspiration and motivation from the fact that there was a successful international anti-apartheid movement.
Now, one of the other defenses raised by Continental was the non-payment of the account by Sweetworks. And the judge found that was not true and not correct. In fact, that was never a basis for the cancellation of the contract. So that basis was also rejected. But it's interesting that there is a common denominator between Sweetworks and Broadway Sweets, the owners of Stumbo, who have a common representative, Mr. Nazir Osman, who was part of this matter as well.
Well, Sweetworks, we use advertising agencies an advertising agency that other companies, including Broadway and other suppliers across the country, use. And what we thought was very important when taking out these billboards was to do it in a professional way. And our Sweetworks agency, under its CEO, had made it very clear to Continental Media before we put the billboards up that this is going to be a political campaign, that it's going to be dealing with the Palestinian issue. Is this okay? Can we take it out? And Continental Media at that early stage had made it clear that it was all above board. It was after the interference from members of the Israeli lobby that Continental Media had all of a sudden changed its tune.
Yeah, I think the judge spoke about Ram Kisoon, who was the legal advisor of Continental Media, a lawyer who responded with the breach after a letter was sent to them already on the 18th of March 2013. But we have another caller on the line. Caller, please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Ashraf. I'm calling from Azadpur. How are you, Muhammed?
Alhamdulillah, well, and yourself?
Very well, thank you. Muhammed, I'd just like to take this opportunity to congratulate you on the victory at the courts. Also, I'd like to thank you and your team for heading the BDS very successfully, I'd say. There's a number of people out here that do support you. I want to quickly find out, Muhammad, if you can help me, a lay person, with regard to the soft drink, Coca-Cola. What is the stand there, and what do I say to people who correctly argue with me that it doesn't help targeting Woolworths or Coca-Cola, that the Jewish lobby community businessmen control everything we eat and do? How do I respond to such reaction? And I'll listen on the TV. Thank you very much again, Muhammad.
Jazakallah so much. Jazakallah also for these words of encouragement. But it's really the supporters across the country that really make BDS South Africa and BDS more generally internationally successful. To answer some of the questions that were put forward, as BDS South Africa and as an organization, we haven't as yet embarked on a full-scale boycott campaign rather on Coca-Cola or on any other or in any other fizzy drink or soda. We're focusing on when it comes to consumer boycott, we're focusing on Woolworths, we're focusing on SodaStream, which is an Israeli company sold in various supermarkets across South Africa, from your Macro, Game, Spar, Checkers, etc. What we're going to be doing is we want to move from victory to victory, from goal to goal. However, there are certain organizations in the country that are pursuing, for example, a boycott of Coke or a boycott of Pick n Pay, and we don't discourage any of this. We just provide information where necessary. We are encouraging, however, that people join us in this Woolworths campaign. Let us make it a successful nationwide campaign, and let that victory send shockwaves across the retail industry. Let that victory send a very clear message to all retailers that if you have a relationship with Israel, that there is going to be a consequence, that there are going to be consequences to that. As to people that say, why boycott Woolworths, or why even participate in the BDS campaign, well, firstly, it was successful in terms of the apartheid boycott, the boycott against apartheid South Africa. But secondly, in the last 9 years, remember BDS was only formed in 2005 by the Palestinian people. In the last 5 years, we've achieved major and significant victories. Dutch pension fund, Norwegian pension fund, Swedish pension fund, all divesting from Israel. The world's richest person, Bill Gates, divesting from G4S, one of the security companies involved in Israel. He withdrew his entire 2 billion rands worth of shares after being called on by BDS South Africa, amongst other BDS activists. And so I think that it's not a matter of will BDS work, it is already working. We know for a fact, for example, that Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu earlier on this year, in February this year, convened his cabinet, all his ministers, to discuss how do we undermine this growing BDS campaign and this BDS movement and this increasing isolation of the state of Israel. And in this meeting, Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, decided with his cabinet on 3 things. Firstly, to expand the budget for countering and challenging BDS and increasing it by 100 million shekels. That's about 300 million rands. The second thing that Netanyahu and his cabinet did was to expand the budget for Mossad, the Israeli intelligence services, to look into, to investigate BDS organizations and activists around the world. And the third was to move the responsibility for countering and for challenging BDS from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to the Ministry of Strategic Affairs. Israel's Ministry of Strategic Affairs is the ministry that deals with threats like the Iranian threat or the nuclear threat. So the BDS campaign is already having an impact. Even before it reaches 10 years, it's already having an impact on Israel and on the Israeli government.
Mohammed, we have another call on the line. Caller, please go ahead.
Hi, assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
My name is Nariman. I think what I've heard now, you've answered some of my questions, but I still need to understand why not Pick n Pay? Because I'm understanding that they are companies that directly support and contribute towards the Zionist movement. And Woolworths imports Israeli products. So I'm just trying to understand why not Pick n Pay? They seem to me to be the sort of the bigger offender, you know, and supporter of the Zionist movement and directly contributing to the killing of the people in Gaza. If you could perhaps explain that to me, inshallah.
Mohammed, thank you.
Jazakallah khairan.
Thank you for your question, Mohammed.
Okay, well, all South African retailers, well, most South African retailers, whether it's Pick n Pay, Spar, Checkers, or Woolworths, all have some form of trade relationship with Israel currently. And all of them are of the similar magnitude, about 12 million or 1% of their purchases come in from Israel. So all of them are guilty, and so it's a question of strategically where do you start off. Now, one of the reasons why we're going after Woolworths is because it claims to be this ethical company. It claims to be this company that appreciates environmental issues and human rights. And so we're holding Woolworths accountable to its own claims, its own propositions, and its own image that it tries to portray. Then there are other various reasons. For example, one of Woolworths' shareholders is a government-related body, and we are busy engaging with this body to see whether shareholders can be affected by this issue. Thirdly, they've recently bought over a retailer in Australia where we have a strong support base, and we hope to make the Boycott Woolworths campaign an international campaign by drawing on our supporters from there.
If I understand from what you said, I think you've repeated this. You're not taking a shotgun approach, you're taking a laser-like concentrated approach on a particular organization or store, and you're making that as an example or your benchmark for your protest.
Yes, and there was a question about Pick n Pay directly supporting. We haven't been provided with hard evidence. What we have been told is that some of the shareholders or the main owners, the Ackerman family, for example, does support certain Zionist causes and organizations. However, the BDS campaign is not about individuals. It's not about individuals, it's about companies and those companies' relations with Israel. Now, Woolworths' main importing from Israel is fresh produce, fruits and vegetables. And a human rights organization called Who Profits produced a report last year indicating that the majority of Israeli agricultural companies have operations in the illegal Israeli settlements. And so one of the cases that we are putting forward to Woolworths is make available the names of the Israeli suppliers so that we can be certain that none of those suppliers have any sort of operations in those settlements, in those illegal settlements, because the United Nations Special Rapporteur for Human Rights, Professor Richard Falk, in a report produced last year, called on all international businesses not to make sure that they have no relations whatsoever with any companies, Israeli companies that have any sort of operations in the illegal settlements, because this is in contravention of international law.
So this is not something you've thought up. I mean, it's part of an international, let's say, judgment by, you say, Richard Falk. I'm asking that we just go for a short break. Please stay tuned and join us after this break. And welcome back to Legal Ease, the show that converts legal jargon into legal ease. Tonight, my very special guest is Muhammed Desai from BDS South Africa, who has recently been involved in a high court action against Continental Media. We've been talking about that at length, but I understand that we have a caller, Muhammad. Can we just take this caller? Please go ahead.
Hello, assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
This is Mustaq from Durban.
Yes, Mustaq, please go ahead.
Okay, talk about a recent campaign called ESD, is Buy Support Israel, which was on Facebook. Now, this is obviously certain Zionists to show that Israeli products supported and supporting entities.
Mustaq, sorry, we have a very bad line. The line keeps on.
Hold on. Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm saying about the BSD, which is the Buy, Support and Develop Israel campaign.
Yes.
Right, which is obviously, to my understanding, to be supported by the various Zionist interest groups here in South Africa to show their support and solidarity with Israeli products and Israeli supporting entities.
Mm-hmm.
What I've noticed is that obviously the very emergence of such a grouping affirms that BDS is working. For if BDS was not working, this would not have come about, right? But at the same time, you take a company like Discam, which brazenly has endorsed BSD, right? And even comments from, which is a letter, which is from the CEO. I mean, shouldn't this be grounds? Although what Brother Muhammad said earlier on, that we need that evidence is required before targeting a company on the BDS radar, but isn't this grounds enough to, like, target such an entity or a company?
Mohammed?
Yeah. Well, I think there are two things that I want to point out. Well, maybe three. The first is that I think the caller is correct, that the development of an organization such as Buy, Support and Develop, very creative, using our acronym to try to counter us, is an indication that the Israeli lobby in this country is becoming increasingly desperate in terms of how to deal with the BDS campaign. And again, I'd like to stress that the success of the BDS campaign is really because of ordinary people out there becoming and joining this extraordinary movement. This is the lifeblood of the BDS campaign. It's people out there that decide to participate in it. But secondly, as to BSD, I think that also whilst we acknowledge BSD and we see what they are doing, I don't think we should become too excited and be misled also by some of the products or some of the companies that they are trying to focus on. We do suspect that some of the messages that they are pushing out is specifically aimed at our supporters, and in trying to break the spirit of our supporters, but also trying to break our support base. So, for example, trying to suggest other companies that are supporting Israel. We know of the various companies that have relationships with Israel, but as indicated, we have to choose our battles carefully. We will get to Dis-Chem at some point. Now, Dis-Chem also, again, it's like the Pick and Pay example. They do have a trade relationship with Israel, which means that they do come under the BDS spotlight. However, the CEO's comments, for example, supporting Israel, as horrible as what they are and as Zionist as what they are, those comments in themselves don't make the company necessarily a BDS target. Now, I think that, on a personal level, I, for example, don't shop at Dis-Chem, but we haven't as yet launched a campaign against Dis-Chem. We are wanting to focus our energies on Woolworths when it comes to the consumer boycott. Of course, we have other campaigns, legal, diplomatic, political campaigns that we run. But in terms of the consumer boycott, we want to make the biggest impact here, win this year, and then send that message to other retailers.
Thank you for your call. Mohammed, just to come back to the case that we were talking about, I think one of the other defenses raised by sayers was that there was no competent authority that gave permission, or there was a competent authority like the Advertising Standards Authority or the second respondent, the City of Johannesburg, asking for the removal of the advert. But the judge found?
The judge found that they were lying, to put it very simply. And in fact, embarrassingly for Continental Outdoor Media, the spokesperson of the City of Johannesburg, where this billboard had been erected, and the city which Continental Media claims instructed the company to remove our billboards, the spokesperson for the City of Johannesburg, even before the court case, came out saying that it's really unfortunate and sad to see that the BDS South Africa billboards have been removed, because those billboards provided a form of education to members of the public.
Mohammed, we have another call on the line. Caller, please go ahead.
Thank you. Congratulations, Mohammed, for all the good work that you're doing. I agree with you fully regarding the fact that you need to focus on one target at a time. We implemented the same strategy about 15 or 20 years ago. At that stage, a group of medical funds decided to designate doctors as approved versus non-approved as dispensing doctors. They did it unilaterally. I was in chairman of one of the groups, and we decided to target Bonitas Medical Fund and Consolidated out of the group of 98 to boycott them in return, because they were arbitrarily boycotting doctors as well. And within 3 months, the medical aid came to the knees, and they said, okay, how can we negotiate and resolve the problem? So I think the targeted laser approach is much better, because you get a higher compliance as opposed to a shotgun dispersed approach. The second one, or the second strategy we did 15 years ago, is that we told the receptors of each doctor to phone the medical aid on a regular basis, those two, Bonitas and Consolidated. And imagine you get 1,500 receptionists or 1,500 doctors phoning the switchboard of Consolidated and Bonitas Medical Fund that basically froze the switchboard. So if information about Palestine, give them about the facts about Palestine. Spend 10 minutes very politely talking to them. So what do you think will happen to the switchboard of Woolworths? They won't get any other calls. So the switchboard will be jammed. So I think besides the once a week or once a month campaign, I think everybody should phone Woolworths on a random basis, ask for the CEO, ask for the manager, and say, I need to talk to you very politely. Besides boycott, I'm going to the stores and say, we'll spend 15 minutes with you. And can I please give you this book on Israel and apartheid state or why Israel, and say, can I come back next week and have you read my book? Have you read the facts? And can we just have a discussion? What's going to happen? The Woolworths will close down. Thank you. I'll listen on the air. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. What do you think of that contribution, Mohammed?
I think it's an excellent strategy. I think it's an excellent tactic. I mean, if we get all those listeners, all those viewers out there today to commit themselves to tomorrow calling Woolworths and to also spread the message, make sure that you call another 5 people in your family, in your community, and make them aware of the Boycott Woolworths campaign. I think that jamming the lines is an excellent idea. But also, I mean, I think that it's similar to the ways in which the anti-apartheid movement during the 1980s also pushed out the boycott of apartheid South Africa. For example, we know that people in the 1980s would go into stores that had oranges from apartheid South Africa. They would put stickers on them. They would also get involved in what we call till jamming, where they would load products from a store that supports apartheid South Africa or it has products from apartheid South Africa, go through to the till and refuse to pay for this year, make a fuss, educate people around you. And really, the BDS movement is also calling on people to become fuss makers, become headaches for those that support Israel, for those that arrogantly refuse to adhere to the Palestinian boycott campaign.
I think that doctor's message is, don't put your money where your mouth is, put your phone where your mouth is. Mohammed, we have another caller on the line. Please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
My name is Ismail. I'm calling from Kilani.
Welcome.
Jazakallah. I wish to congratulate Muhammad on the good work that he's doing. And I would like to raise one point. As far as the advertising of the BDS campaign is concerned, it is rather unfortunate that most South Africans do not have access to DSTV. The large percentage of our fellow brothers in this country have access to our local television stations, SABC 1, 2, and 3. Why can't we extend the advertisement and the campaign on those channels as we do pay license for television in this country? Jazakallah.
Thank you for your contribution. Mohammed, we're running out of time. You can respond to that caller shortly. We have one more caller. Caller, please go ahead. Caller, please go ahead. While we're waiting for that call, Mohammed, what? Okay, I understand he's on. Caller, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
My name is Rushdie from Johannesburg. I just want one quick question in terms of the Woolworth situation. What about employees, Muslim employees, who are working for Woolworth?
Okay.
Your question is what happens to the employees?
Yeah, Muslim employees.
Muslim
Who are
employees.
working for Woolworth.
I think it should be all employees. Mohammed, what?
Okay, well, let's answer the Woolworths one first. We have been engaging with the union, SACAU, who unionizes and organizes in Woolworths. And we've also approached various employees, including Muslim employees. And interestingly enough, some Muslim employees that we approached in Cape Town to ask them and to give us advice on this campaign said, bring it on. Bring it on. Woolworths is definitely feeling the impact of this boycott, and you guys have a good chance of winning this year. So the employees themselves supporting us. But also I'd like to indicate that the boycott of Woolworths and the protests against Woolworths are not the problem. It's Woolworths' trade relationship with Israel that's the problem. Similarly to how during apartheid, the protests against apartheid and the boycott against apartheid was never the problem. It was apartheid that was the problem. And so likewise here, we should really be asking Woolworths, aren't you behaving recklessly when you could be sourcing these products, these Israeli tomatoes, cucumbers and other things, when you could be sourcing it locally in South Africa? You are putting jobs on the line, you are putting your own company's reputation on the line, and your company's share price and shareholder confidence on the line. So I really think that also Woolworths has refused to meet with BDS South Africa where we can discuss these issues, but we do hope that they will come to their senses very soon.
I think more importantly, you had Richard Falk saying that this is the way that you are not you are to isolate the purchases or sales of the sales from occupied territories. Muhammad, we just you were talking about the caller before that.
Yes.
What was your response?
Well, we'd really be asking members of the community to support us in terms of financially donating towards the organization. We run on a shoestring budget, but with your support, we can take out more billboards, more newspaper adverts, more TV and radio adverts across the board and on all stations. The Israeli lobby has much resources behind them. We are giving them a run for their money, but you can give us that financial muscle that's necessary for us to take this campaign to a much larger, broader audience, which we are working on.
Well, I mean, I think you've got recognition, as you said, in the Israeli parliament. Netanyahu has moved an entire division to deal with, strategically dealing with BDS. Mohammed, just to come back to the findings of the judge at the end of this matter, I think it was very interesting what the judge had to say. Could you just sum it up? What was the judgment?
Well, firstly, the judge said that the removal of the billboards were illegal and unconstitutional. That secondly, certain bylaws had to be changed in order to appreciate and to advance freedom of expression, setting a freedom of expression precedent in this country. But thirdly, to sweeten the deal, the judge has also declared that all costs must be paid for by the respondents, including Continental Outdoor Media. So this year was quite a positive judgment. It's also motivating for BDS South Africa members, but also, and again I'd like to stress, for the thousands of supporters that BDS South Africa has, and the thousands of soldiers in many ways that BDS South Africa has, the thousands of activists that BDS South Africa has across the country. It's really, again, because of you. We do the simple work in the office. You guys really are the ones that should own this victory.
Wasn't there mandamus? Wasn't there an order that the Continental will put back your billboards within a certain time?
Continental Outdoor Media has an obligation now to pull the billboards back up within 10 days and to put it up in either the Houghton site or a site equivalent to the Houghton site. So we are very excited about this, and we will be communicating with the members of the public as to when this will be going up. And in addition, we have been fortunate enough to receive certain calls from people willing to sponsor billboards in other places in the country. And so we do look forward to rolling out the billboard campaign to many and various other cities and towns across the country.
Mohammed, thank you very much for having taken the time to join us tonight. I certainly have been enriched by your presence here. I've learned a lot from the Continental Media case. I think it's important in terms of the judge's decision that certain parts of the bylaws of the city of Johannesburg regarding what can and cannot be advertised will now be constitutionally challenged. That is a big, I think, victory for law as on its own. But you still have a long journey to go, and thank you for having come in. I know you have a very demanding schedule, and thank you to the listeners out there and the viewers for your calls and your contribution. Keep well until the next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.